Hi, I'm PatriciaPattiMonsen. Some of you call me Pat and some of you call me Patty, but either one will work.
Did you have any other nicknames growing up, Patty? In the family?
No, the family called me Patty.
Okay.
And when I when I was in college, it was Patty or Pat. And then when I went to work, I wanted to be more sophisticated, so I said Pat Monsen. And then as people got to know me and got to know my family and heard everybody calling me Patty, then those closer friends started calling me Patty. So it's a little bit of a mix.
Who was Patricia in the family? How did you get the name Patricia?
That's interesting. My mom's name was Rose, and she always wanted to have a name that could be a boy's name or a girl's name. She really didn't want to be known as Rose because it was very obviously feminine. So when she was about to name me, she wanted to give me a name that would sound like a boy's name or a girl's name. And I was almost called Jacqueline because her brother's name was Jack. And they just wound up with Patricia, but it was not for anyone in particular.
So, but it sounds like Mom was the dominant influence in your having the name Patricia.
Yes, I do remember she said to me that she named me, when she chose the name Patty for a nickname, she wrote P-A-T-T-I, and she remembered how Patty Page spelled her name. So okay. That was just interesting.
What was your mother's maiden name?
Meisner.
Okay. Now, what ethnicity would that be? What was
my maternal grandmother was Austrian-Hungarian, and my mother was, I guess she was brought up speaking German, and then she was born in Helena, Montana. And then they moved to New York, and she learned English in a bilingual class.
Huh.
Yeah.
What decade would that have been?
Well, she was born in 1925, so it must have been, in the 30s.
Yeah. Okay. Your mother was born out west, but her folks emigrated to this country, so your grandparents emigrated?
Well, my grandmother came over from Austria-Hungary when she was 17, and she told me the story when she was, a young girl, and I think she took a boat, and it took about, 9 or 10 days, and she came over, and her brother Nick came over.
And where did they?
And
what
they
was their
lived.
Port of entry? Do you know?
I'm not even sure,
Okay.
but I know that they settled finally in Yakima, Washington. Actually, my mother was not born in Helena. I just thought of it. It's Glendive, a little town. But my grandmother, when they came to this country, they went to Barnegat, New Jersey, where my uncle had a farm. Their Uncle Max.
Okay, so it must have been through the Port of New York, or
probably so. I believe it was New York. I don't remember exactly.
Okay, sure. Do you have early memories of your mom that you can share with us?
Yes, my mother would be, she was very creative, and she was a great seamstress. She could sew anything, from draperies to men's suits to coverings for couches and things, and she would always make our Halloween costumes from scratch, and they were always very, very unique.
Mm-hmm. And what was Dad's background?
My dad, he worked for Westinghouse Elevators, and he installed and ran wires for and did all kinds of elevators in Manhattan.
Wow. Now that could be, as we've seen in the headlines lately, that could be a very dangerous occupation too.
It actually was. I remember many times where he would be at work, and he would be running late, or he would have to work overtime. And one time in particular, there was a terrible accident where 2 or 3 men fell down an elevator shaft in one of the high skyscrapers. And my father called my mother, and I guess at that time I was probably about 10 or 11, because we lived in Brentwood. And he said to her, Ro, I'm going to be home a little late tonight. Everything is fine. But, listen, Eddie's right here. He wants to tell you something. So he put his friend Eddie on the phone, and he spoke to my mother. And he says, do me a favor. Tell Eileen I tried to call her earlier, but the line was busy. And we didn't know until many hours later when they came home that my father put Eddie on the phone so my mother would hear his voice, and that she would hear his both voices. So when they heard about this terrible tragedy down in Manhattan, both wives knew their husbands were safe.
Yes.
But that was a couple of times there were some real, very scary
sure.
moments at work.
What was your father's Munsen is what nationality? Is that Irish?
No, Monsen is my husband's name, Norwegian.
I'm sorry. Listen to me. Yes.
That's okay. My maiden name is Pagano.
Pagano.
And my father's family, well, they were all born in America, except I think his father was 2 years old when he came from Italy, actually.
Okay. What part of Italy was he from?
They were from Genoa, or in a small town north of Genoa.
And is that one of the places that you have visited in your travels?
Yes, it is.
It is.
Yes. I went there actually before I was a teacher. I went to Europe right after college, and I went. Well, I was a teacher, but I wasn't really full time. And it was 1976. I went to Europe, and I went to Genoa, and my friend and I tried to find the small town that my family was from, and we were told when we asked about it, oh yeah, take a bus to this particular stop, and then get out of the bus and walk about 2 hours up into the hills. And we both thought, we don't know the name of the town. We're not sure. We don't know where we're going, and we're not doing this.
Yes.
So I wound up getting all the family gifts from Genoa.
We mentioned the name Munsen and your husband. Let's talk about him for a moment. How did you guys meet?
I met my husband at a piano bar in Port Washington.
What's his name?
Magnar is his real name. And when he came to this country from Norway and tried to get a job, he would introduce himself and people would say, "What is your name?" And he would have to explain it and spell it. So one man said to him, "Why don't you just call yourself Mike? It'll be so much easier." So he did. So I met him as Mike. And then as I got to know him, I found out his background and history. I thought he had an Irish accent, but it was Norwegian.
And when did he was born in Norway?
He was born in Bergen, Norway.
In Bergen. And
he came over to this country at about age 26. His two sisters came over, and they lived here, and he came over to join them.
Okay.
And when he did, he learned English, and he came over speaking Norwegian.
Wow.
So he was a messenger boy in the city, or he would like a courier to bring things. He learned how to get around Manhattan. I believe they all stayed in a place in Elmhurst.
Huh.
And he learned language.
What year would that have been, Patty?
Oh, let's see. He was a lot older than I. He was born in 1934, so 26 years later.
Mm-hmm.
So
okay. Now your present family situation and your residence, where would that be?
I live in Brentwood, and I live there by myself right now, and it's not too far from the high school, and I'm enjoying, fixing different parts of the house up. I've had friends to redo the basement, and we redid the kitchen. Different projects. It's keeping me busy. But people say to me, "Well, now that you're retired, are you thinking about moving someplace else?" And I hadn't really thought about it because I'm comfortable where I am. My dad lived in town for many, many years. We lost him in 2009. So I wouldn't have left back then because he lived here.
Right.
But, and now my son, he lives at my dad's house. And
which is where?
In Brentwood.
Oh, in Brentwood.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. And so, and my cousin is like a sister to me. She's in East Northport. So the immediate family is very, very very small right now. But I have some very, very special friends, and I think my friends are my family,
Yes.
And my cousin, of course, and her children.
Now, am I correct in asking if you lost Mike?
Yes, he passed away in 2001. He battled cancer for about 14 months, but he had a number of medical problems, so it was a really tough battle. But he had multiple myeloma, an unusual form.
You have had your share of tragedy in your life.
Yes, I would say so.
The history, though, that you have with the community of Brentwood has to be extensive. You know a lot of people in this.
Well,
community.
I moved to Brentwood when I was 10, and I moved from Levittown. I guess I should backtrack. I was born in the Bronx, and I stayed in the Bronx until I was 4 years old. And
What's one of your earliest memories from
earliest
the Bronx?
memories? Well, the next door neighbor, my friend Florence, had a three-wheel, a big tricycle, and we used to ride that back and forth on the sidewalk. And since I was only, 4, I wasn't able to go outside by myself. And my cousin next door, to the right of me, Florence was to the left. My cousin Bobby and Carol Lee, the cousins, were next door to the right. I recall him taking me downstairs, and my mother said, "Okay, listen to Bobby." He was only 7. I was 4. And I recall he actually said to me, "Whatever you do, don't put your foot in the street." I looked at him and I thought, "Oh yeah?" And I went and I put my foot in the street just because he said not to. And he yelled, "Auntie Rose!" And she came out and she said, "That's it, you're in." And I was back inside. But that was just a silly remembrance, but it's something that stuck in my mind.
That was
I
an
defied
indication of things to come, I would say.
Yes. But I do remember stories of her taking me to the Bronx Zoo in my stroller, almost on a daily basis. We lived by Washington Avenue and 108th Street.
Oh, so
it was,
you could walk it.
We walked to the Bronx Zoo. It was a nice little place, and across the street was the Salvation Army. And I remember sitting out nights and learning songs and going to arts and crafts fair things and like little classes across the street with other kids. But my real recollection is Levittown.
Now, what year would you have gone to Levittown?
That would have been 1956.
All right, so Levittown was about 11 years old at that point.
And we were moving, was a big deal, moving from an apartment to a house.
Yes.
And going over then I guess the Whitestone Bridge. We went over the bridge and we drove to this house. It was like a big adventure. And my father's brother Paul lived in East Meadow. And we had visited them numerous times, and Paul was a real advocate for us to move out to Long Island. So when it was time to move, we were in Levittown, only a stone's throw from East Meadow. And it was a really a wonderful adventure. A house with a backyard, and my brother was 1. My brother Rick was 3 years younger than I. And we lived in Levittown for, I'd say, probably about 6 years.
There probably weren't a lot of trees in Levittown at that time either. Or was your home in part of the potato fields, Levittown, or was that in other areas?
We lived on Barber Lane, right off the Hempstead Turnpike.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't recall potato fields, really, but I do know in our backyard we had an apple tree and a pear tree and a couple of fruit trees, crab apples. And
I want to ask you about your son. What's his name?
Andrew.
And tell me about Andrew's personality, the qualities of his person, and what talents you see that he has. What's he doing these days?
Well, I'm very happy to say that he's been subbing. I'd love to see him full-time teacher, but he's been subbing for the past 3 years since college as a music teacher. And he's been working primarily in Brentwood and in the middle school and high school, although he has actually done some elementary school teaching as well. He's done almost the whole gamut in 3 years. And as far as personality,
does he have a favorite instrument that he plays?
Yes, his main instrument is trombone, and his second instrument is his voice. He's also he has a very nice voice.
Baritone?
I don't know. I think baritone.
Does he sing popular tunes, or is he
That's
upper register?
no. I guess it's baritone. Interestingly enough, growing up in the house, I mean, my husband loved classical music and Pavarotti and Carreras and all of those. And as a little kid,
The
Andrew
tenors.
the tenors. Andrew would sing along with them, and not with the words necessarily, but the notes, and he would hum, and he loved the classical, and then he was.
So he's a serious singer of
And
serious music.
well, and then of course listening to my music with James Taylor and the Beatles, and Cat Stevens and Simon and Garfunkel. He's had that
70s.
whole the 70s and the 60s, and not to say that he doesn't like his hard rock, because there were many times I'd say, please turn that music down. But I got a kick out of some of the things that he liked. He never met my brother. My brother died when I was just engaged to be married. That was back in 1982. And so the only knowledge my son has of his uncle is things that he's heard over the years. And I think it's a tribute to all of the family who have shared memories of my brother Rick, because sometimes Andrew will say things like, Uncle Rick would have liked that kind of music, right? And he just kind of knows some of the things my brother would have enjoyed or liked from things that we've said. And interestingly enough, a little side comment, when at my father's wake, my brother's 3 friends came, and my brother's gone since 1982. So for 2009 to have 3 fellows walk in, that it just floored me. And I introduced them to my son, and after that was over, and he said to me, he says, I can't believe it. It was so nice to meet his friends, to see a little, like, learn about him through their eyes, not just yours.
Yes.
And interestingly enough, one of the friends commented about how my father's house was so retro. He loved to go over and go for coffee and say hello, because no time changed from 1982.
Yeah.
So recently, when my son took over the house, this particular friend stopped by. He saw my father's car in the driveway and thought I was there. And he knocked on the door, and it was my son. And he said, "Hey, come on in. Let's come see the kitchen. It's not retro anymore." And it was kind of a comical thing.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
But
I don't think I asked you before, but I'd be curious to know, did you know both your sets of grandparents? Did you ever meet both of them, or did you only get to meet?
no, that's a sad thing. I really didn't have time with my father's parents. I never met his father. His father died when he was just in service.
Okay.
My grandmother, who we called Nana, I was 1 when she died. And I thought it was very interesting that my son was 1 when my mom died. But I had heard stories that I knew her footsteps. So when she would come up the stairs of the apartment, I would hear her coming up, and I would yell out, "Nana." So although I don't know her, I knew who she was when I was 1. And listening to some of the stories over the years, I have a fond feeling about the woman that she was.
Right.
She raised she had a lot of different adversities in her life. And another interesting thing was that my father lost his brother at a young age. He was 13. And when my brother died, he said to me, "I never thought that I would relive what my mother lived." And my grandmother had a very interesting philosophy. She said, you can never have, almost like glasses. You can never have too many glasses, or you can never have too many children. And she had 5 children, and lost 1 at age 2, 1 at age 26, and then the rest of them were okay for many, many years. But, a lot of adversity. And I think I learned from my grandmother's strength and stamina that kind of taught my father how to live and how to prepare for life and the adversity in life. She was a very strong woman, and so was he.
Was there ever, when at family get, gatherings or family get-togethers, was there a family story that got told over and over and over again that you can recall?
There were a couple. There were a couple. And now that the older generation is all passed, my cousin Paulette and I are the ones who are retelling those stories to our children. And they've probably heard a number of stories, just silly things.
Okay.
My father and his sisters and his brother Paul, they used to have to, I think, wax the floor. And so to make a game out of it, they would put the wax on cloths, and then they would do like skate all over the floor, and they would have fun while they cleaned.
Yes. Yeah.
And that kind of thing. But
I can
we have some
imagine
old
that
family
happening.
We had some family recipes. You know, the old famous, the ravioli filling, special recipe for that. And
You
we
pass
have
on those family
we have reactivated that. We had that last Christmas. We brought that back up. Yeah.
Is there an occupation or a way of life that was in the family that we haven't talked about so far? Back at your grandparents' generation at that time, were there things that they did before they came to this country, or that were part of their history that we haven't touched on?
No, I think my father's father worked in a restaurant a lot of hours. I don't know what my grandmother did. I think she was more or less at the home
Okay,
with the
sure.
house, raising children. My grandmother on my mother's side was a very good cook, and she used to cook for rich families in New York City, and my mother would go along and help do things and clean up the dishes and be her flunky, so to speak.
Yeah.
I often think that I should have listened and learned and written down some of my grandmother's old recipes from way back, because she would just say, "Oh, just stir this, feel this. This is how it is." And she didn't have amounts. It was just, "Oh, you just put this much in. Just you can tell." It's like, I know you can tell. I can't tell. So that kind of thing.
Who were the adults besides your immediate family that had the most impact on you as a child?
I would have to say, let's see. When I was in high school, I was very much involved in the encounter group from St. Anne's Church, and that was really by accident. My good friend Kathy said to me one day, "How would you like to go for a weekend away on a retreat?" And I thought, "Gee, that sounds like fun. Why not? A weekend away? Where is it?" It's in Brooklyn, in a place called St. Paul's, but it's through the church. You have to apply for it, and they'll have to pick you. But I think we can go. So that was the beginning. And as I say, it was purely by accident, because I didn't know what it was all about, but I was game for the weekend to try it. And Kathy teases me still to this day, and she says, "Oh my God, the encounter! I created a monster," because it became a part of our lives forever. And we still talk about it, and we still contact people who were. See, it was a weekend that you would go away for the weekend. It was all kinds of talks and sharing and different kinds of prayers, and it was just very, very nurturing and very unique to that time in the 60s, 68. And we met a lot of people there who became friends for life. I recall that one of the parish priests, Father John Crane, was going to drive me in for the weekend, and it was on Thanksgiving Day. So my father had to drive me to his house in Belmore, or in Wanto it was, and I had to go to his family's home. Then we would leave from there and would drive to St. Paul's. And I said to my friend Kathy, "What am I going to talk to a priest about for an hour in the car?" She says, "Like, just talk to him like he's anybody. You know, he's not going to quiz you on the Baltimore Catechism or something." So it was really the beginning of a great friendship, and it spanned over 40 years.
The difference between the 50s and the 60s in terms of transparency and openness, it was like turning the page.
Oh yeah, yeah. We were very fortunate because the movement in the church was encompassing not only teens, but it was marriage encounter. It was family gatherings. I recall we actually got the families involved in this stuff because we were at a mass one time. It was an encounter mass, and we all went back to my house after for coffee and cake and a party. And I got on the altar and I announced to everyone, you know, just look for the house with the red light, the lamppost, the Christmas lamppost. And Father Crane he says, it's right down Orange Street, you know, and it was kind of comical. You had to be there, but a little naive. And it was great. I mean, the people were not only our friends, they were our mentors. They were people we could talk to when you wanted to talk to an adult, but not your parent necessarily. And they were counselors. You know, they were counselors, much like the teachers are now to students in school.
Yes. Now, if you hadn't become a teacher and gone into education, what do you think you would have done? What direction might you have taken other than the one that you did?
I don't know. I love photography, so possibly something in photography, but I really wanted to be a teacher from early on.
You did.
I had teachers that really made teaching look like fun. And one person in particular, well, there were a number, but as far as English, I had R.O.B.S Herzog as a teacher, and he was a phenomenal teacher. He took us to Broadway on occasion. I saw Henry Fonda on Broadway in our town and loved it. Chico Frankel in Spanish took us to see Men of La Mancha, and we loved it. I mean, I had some of the best, and when I saw that, and I saw how much that I loved school because of it, I thought, you know what, I would do that same thing if I had a chance. And so that was an eye-opening thing for me to see not only you know, the teaching end of it, but the activities, the sports. In when I taught middle school in West Junior High, I was more involved with sports. I was coaching. I got roped into coaching boys soccer. That's a funny story. Ray Liebert and Doug Colucci asked me, and they said, listen, we have finally, in all of these years, we have a girls soccer team, a JV boys soccer team, and a varsity boys team. But we only have 2 coaches, us. So they both said, we need someone else. And the person who was supposed to do it can't do it. You live around the corner. I was living in an apartment in Deer Park then. You're single. You could do this. And I said, but I've never even seen a soccer game. I can't. They said, no, we'll teach you everything. So, of course, I couldn't say no to them. Yeah. And they did. They really spent time, and they taught me what I had to do. And then I did that for the first year. And then the second year, when then Doug took over for the JV boys, and I went on to the girls soccer team. So we flipped. And it was fun. And I did that for a couple of years. And then they had the same problem with track. And Nick Geraci and I did girls track one time. But those kinds of things that, you know, you were there for them, you were needed, you just rose to the occasion. Was it the best soccer team? No. Did we have a lot of fun and a lot of laughs? Oh, yes. And I'll never forget, I had to run practice one time on a Saturday morning. Ray had to go to a confirmation or a wedding or something. And I had the JV boys and the JV boys and the varsity boys. I had to do calisthenics, and it was tough. And he told me what I had to do. He wrote down everything to do for the practice for 2 or 3 hours. And the boys helped a lot. They were great. Doug was on the other field with the girls. He said, "If you need me, call me." But he was far, far away. So it worked out well. And at the end of the practice, I said to the kids, we're all sitting around. I said, "Okay, guys, if you had to give me a grade, what would you give me?" And they said, "Well, for skills, you have to get a C. But for effort, we'll give you the A." So that was good. That was good for me.
Wonderful.
So I stayed on.
You probably answered the question about the people who influenced you, because you've already talked about Ross Herzog and some of the others that you.
Oh, I as a student, I had some remarkable teachers. My first year here, and this is real. I just thought of this now. My first year in Brentwood, in fifth grade, I had Barry Friedfertig, and a couple of years ago, I was honored, I think, at the 20th year dinner for teaching for 20 years. And that was also the night that he was retiring. And so Joe Hogan would ask different people to speak on behalf of each group.
Yes.
So he said to me, "Why don't you speak on behalf of the 20-year people?" And I got up and I said, Barry Friedfertig was my first experience with Brentwood. And he was in the audience, and he was very tearful and very, very, very sweet about it. And it was a really nice moment to share.
Yes.
And but right from Barry on to, I had some wonderful, wonderful people. Mrs. Helen Miller in sixth grade. I'll never forget how she held it together when John F. Kennedy was assassinated. I was in sixth grade. And you remember who you were with and who was there with you as a kid. The world's falling apart. All these adults are crying, and what's going to happen? What's going to happen to all of us? And I had Helen Miller that year. And over the years, I've had remarkable teachers. Mike Welch, Joe Fort, Clem Stanzik, Chico Frankel, Ross Herzog. I could name a whole bunch, and I'm sure Joe Fort. I'm missing a lot of people, I'm sure. But and then as a new teacher, I was just so lucky at West Junior High to become friends and learn from Tony Menza and Mary Jo Schmidt and Betsy Nebraskis. Those people are my best friends for like 15 years, and still, for many, many years after.
Patty, you were also working during a time of great national challenge. There were events taking place in the world that affected us in Brentwood while you were in the classroom. You mentioned John F. Kennedy. That's what triggered. You must remember some other times too of other events that happened.
One thing that just I thought of just now when you mentioned that, it wasn't a world event. It was just right here when we had the SWAT team at East Junior High. I was teaching at West, and we had heard something that was not right. And then to go home and to find out and listen to the news that, a class was being held hostage, and there were SWAT teams at that moment now approaching East Middle School, and I knew teachers who were over there. I had just left, my school, and it was a very, very frightening time. I think I sat by the TV from the moment I got home at 3 o'clock or so until probably 11:30 or midnight, never leaving the TV, just watching the unfolding events.
Yes.
And it just really, it makes you realize that no matter where you are, no matter what you do, whatever you teach, things can happen, and you have to be ready for them and think about how you would handle a situation.
Sometimes you just can't prepare for it. You just have to do it, and that's an example. Do you remember your first paying job? The first time you ever paid to render service?
My first payment from like official or babysitting?
Any kind of thing that you
A
received
real
money?
paycheck. I would say J.C. Penney's. I worked in early in high school.
Mm-hmm.
I worked in the junior sportswear, and I met a really dear friend there who's still friends now, and she lives in Albuquerque. Yeah, that was back in.
That was a salary job.
Yes,
Was there
I
anything?
think I made $2.85 an hour.
Okay. Uh-huh. Was there a single most important family holiday that you guys used to celebrate when you were growing up?
Well, we celebrated Thanksgiving and Christmas most often, and I think Thanksgiving definitely became one of my most favorites after the encounter.
Yes.
So that Thanksgiving and the encounter has a lot of sentimentality to me, even to this day.
About gratitude.
Yes. Yeah.
Did you have favorite as well as least favorite subjects when you're going through your early education?
Yes. My favorite subjects were, let's see. Well, English was one. I enjoyed English and I enjoyed history, but I really wasn't into math. You know, but I have to say, once again, I was very lucky. I had a wonderful math teacher, Joe Basso, and he made algebra fun. And so, even though I had this stigma in my mind that I couldn't do math because I had a very hard time in 7th and 8th grade, when I got to Joe Basso's class in 9th, I was fine. And it's funny how I learned something from even those early days in math, because I really felt that I didn't feel free to ask questions in the math classes. And although my teacher knew his material, I just didn't feel that I could ask the questions. And it taught me something as a teacher later on in my own life, that I tried to remember that any student that had a question, not to make them feel dumb or not to make them feel that their question was ridiculous. Not to say that I didn't sometimes forget that. I'm sure sometimes I wasn't as patient as I could have been. And if any of you out there are one of the people I was short with, I'm sorry. But I tried to think about, the damage it does. I mean, my neighbor would help tutor me in math because I'd have a stomachache going to school every day. But I got over that, But again, when you have a subject that you don't care for, it maybe isn't subject. Maybe it's just that you haven't learned how to approach it. And that was a learning experience in itself. But
what about, we live in a part of the country where we have 4 seasons. Did you ever have a favorite season growing up that was maybe the same or different from a favorite season today?
I like everything, I think, except winter. I don't like the cold, dark days. I like spring, for the flowers and the new beginnings, and I like the summer. Okay.
Have you ever given serious thought to moving to warmer climes then?
Well, actually, I had a really nice experience in Hollywood, Florida, and I loved just being down there in November. It was wonderful. So I mean, that's a possibility for the future. I don't know. I'm not going to say never. This has been a mild winter so far, even though it's December. It feels like it's a nice September day today. But I don't like the darkness. I don't like I like the days being light till 9 o'clock. I like the summer.
Why don't you walk us through the schools that you attended from the first day you walked into a classroom? What schools did you attend after that?
Okay. My first school was in Levittown, and that was Abbey Lane on Gardeners Avenue. And I was there for, I guess, kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd and 4th grade. I used to remember all the teachers' names. I don't remember all of them now and in the order. So if I thought about it, I could come up with them, but I'm not going to take the time now to do that. But then I moved to Brentwood in 5th grade, and I started at Southeast. But that was at the time that Loretta Park was opening. So I was only in Southeast for a month. And then we all moved over to Loretta Park School. And so that's when I had Mr. Friedfertig and Miss Miller. When I went to 7th grade, that was at South Middle School. I recall that I had Peggy Engelhardt for English, and she made a great class. I enjoyed her a lot. And interestingly enough, years later, she was out for a year on medical leave, and I took over for her that year at North Middle when the middle schools were set, when junior high turned to middle school. Because up until then, I was teaching at West. I'm skipping around. Okay, so I went back to, as a student, I went to South Middle School and then to Brentwood High School. Brentwood High School was 2 buildings then, Ross and Sonderling. And we actually had to go between buildings and out in the bad weather, a few feet, but it was still enough to get you wet and cold. So I attended Brentwood High School, and then I went to Western Connecticut State College in Danbury, Connecticut, where I studied a secondary ed English.
How come you decided to go to Connecticut school?
Well, that's a funny story. Back in the 70s, I think I had about an 83 average. And New York State schools were accepting students, girls, with 85s. They were taking boys who had 75s to balance out the ratio. And if I would have known then what I know now, I would have made a stink about it. But so I did apply to a number of schools, New Paltz and a few others, in New York State schools. And I was not accepted because of my 83 average. So I was very upset. I went to my counselor, and Jerry Cohen, God bless him, said to me, "The heck with New York. Think of another state." And he says, "You want to go to New Mexico? How about Denver?" I was like, no, that's too far away. So I said, someplace close, someplace, not too far. He said, "How about Connecticut?" I was like, So we talked about that for a while, and then the two of us came up with Western because it was a teacher school. And it was just 2 hours away. I wanted to go away to school. I know that when it was time to make the decision, I made a list, the pros and cons. I had a list of about 10 reasons why I should stay here and go to Suffolk and then transfer. I could keep my car, keep my boyfriend, live at home, save money. I had a whole bunch of reasons. Keep my job at Penny's. And then I had another list that said, why should I go away? And I think I had 2 things. It'll be a new experience because I want to. And I went. And it was a little bit challenging. And I have to say my father was very supportive. My aunt and his sister, who was very, very, very close to all the nieces and nephews since she had no kids of her own, she was like, "Oh, don't let her go away the first year. She's so young. Let her stay here and go away into a year." No, he said, if she wants to go away, she's going away. And I was actually the first of all the cousins to go away to school. My other cousins had gone to school, but they were local. And I was the first to do a 4-year school away from home. And I think it was a really good move.
Where did you do your graduate work?
I took my graduate studies in Cedarwood Post College, and then I finished up at the courses out here, in Brentwood at the Post College. And I was thinking about taking Spanish and doing English and Spanish, but I just stayed I took elementary ed. So I was certified for elementary to secondary with the concentration in English.
How many years were you all told working in public education?
I guess about 33.
Is there something in particular that you can point to with a certain degree of pride in the accomplishment?
Well, I think that over the years, having students come up to me and say to me, "Do you remember the time you did this or the time that you did that?" And truthfully, sometimes you don't remember all of those things. And as they tell the story, it comes back and you start to put names and faces together on what happened. But it was always a real thrill to have students come back and thank you for something that you had no idea you did, or to come back and say, you really made a difference. I've graduated. I had a student that was cutting school all the time. And I tormented that child. I followed him. I called home. I kept after him. And I was with my son in the mall one time. We were walking, and he came up to me and he said, it's because of your mother that I went to school and college. And I thought, wow, it just surprised me that this one boy who I thought probably hated me because I made his life miserable for a while. I wasn't letting up on him. He just was full of all kinds of praise, and it was a nice thing to see. And I think that also had a little bit of a bearing on possibly on my son's choice to go into education, because he saw that there was a value to it. But besides that, he has a tremendous talent, like my husband did in music. So the fact that he wanted to do, a music education, that was very special. But just being an educator of anything, if you can teach someone to have an appreciation, that's a very special thing. As far as accomplishments, I was very glad that I believe it was, I don't know if it was Gail Swenson now or Annie Palmer, but someone asked me to kind of start a program for summer school where we did like a double English class. And I did that for about 11 years. And it was a chance for students who failed 9th grade English, who were taking non-repeat as a 10th grader. If they passed non-repeat, and now they were in 10th grade taking non-repeat and 10th grade English, this was a chance for them to take English. Oh, no, I'm sorry. They didn't have English 10. That was the problem. They were taking non-repeat. This was a chance for them to take a double class of English 10 in the summer, and then in September, catch up with the rest of the class and be in 11th grade. And so I did a 3-hour summer school class for advanced 10. But it really wasn't advanced 10. It was just intensive 10 for them to catch up for 11th grade. And we did that for about 11 years. And it was a handful of kids. It was a small group, maybe 10 students a summer. But it was nice to see that when they got to September, they could have a normal schedule. They didn't have to take a night class with one English and another class in the day. So that was a good thing, I thought.
This is a question, again, a totally different direction, and you may already have answered it, but you may have a different answer because we're going to come at it again now from another angle. Did you have a worst professional day over all those years?
I would have to think about that. I probably had a couple of days that if the lessons didn't work right, if the class just didn't gel, there were a couple of those. But I think one of the hardest days was the day the Twin Towers collapsed. That was tough. That was very tough. I was in the middle. It was almost between periods, I think, and I was in the middle of going back to my room, and I told Cass Howard that I just saw the tower crumble, and we shared a room, and I couldn't even get the words out hardly, and kids were coming in for the next class, and he said to me, "No, they didn't." I said, "Oh yeah, I just saw it," and he was shocked. I was, and I remember him just saying, "Take a deep breath." I just couldn't even catch my breath. And then, the kids are really amazing when they know that something's going on, and they can read us, and if they saw that I was upset and, fighting back tears, and, they were like, okay, let's just sit down. And they just sat and they just waited. And, we all had to share what was happening and experience it and just go on, but it was just the moment. It was tough.
Yes.
And then days after, of course, That was tough, that whole aftermath and not knowing which kids in your class may have had a relative involved directly, you know. And it was a real, it was also emotional for me because that was the last picture I took with my brother and I up on the Twin Towers. And a stranger in New York was taking a picture of his family. And I said, "Hey, would you like me to take a picture of you and your wife and kids?" He said, "Sure, what's that going to cost me?" I said, "Nothing." He said, "Are you kidding? Everything in New York costs money." I said, "Not this." So then I took his picture and I said to him, "Wait a minute, it's going to cost you one thing. Could you take a picture of my brother and I?" And my brother's like, "Oh, would you stop with the camera?" I said, "You're going to want a copy of this picture." And the man took a picture of us, and it was a great picture with the Empire State behind us. And that was July. The picture was July 27th because it was my aunt's birthday, and I missed calling her that day. And my brother was dead by August 21st, the following month. And I had the picture. He had the picture. I sent him copies. It was our last picture together. It was a wonderful day. We spent a whole day in the city. And when the towers went down, I thought to myself, there's some man someplace in this country who's thinking about me, who took that picture, and I'm thinking about him. And the other thing was that I saved the brochure, and it said, the closest some of us will ever get to heaven. And all of those things. And I was feeling all these feelings about that. And I thought, how could I even worry about that kind of a memory? People are losing people. But it still was like a personal affront. How could you take down that tower? And you know, it's amazing the spirit of people, you know. And it was a tough day. Yeah.
Had you looked for a teaching position any place besides Brentwood?
Oh yeah.
You did. Where did you look?
I actually had 2 interviews in Mount Kisco, New York, and it was a lovely little middle school right by a little lake. And I was very hopeful to get that job. There were other people vying for the position, and I believe they did settle on someone who had more experience. And that was the situation that I found also in Southampton. I had a call back for Southampton. I went to 2 interviews out there, and I was given a letter, you know, and it said, you know, your interview was great. We liked you very much, but we just, and of course they were very, I think I spoke to someone. I'm not sure if they wrote it all, if they told me, but I mean, you wouldn't do that nowadays because I mean, that's not fair. But they said, well, you're single and you could marry or move away, but this person has children and they're more stable, so we're going to go with them. But we really liked you a lot. So when Brentwood said to me, "Oh, we have a position," I was like, "Okay," and that was fine by me. The only thing I felt that was going to be different would be how will it feel to work alongside people that I've called, you know, Mr. So-and-so or Mrs. So-and-so. It took a long time to break that down and, you know, and call them by their first name or just by their last name. It took a while.
So what was the building that you began teaching in?
Well, my first job was West Junior High.
West Junior High.
It was a replacement contract. I was subbing from September to January. And then I took over for a teacher named Dan Leone. And it was a January contract. And it was for 9th grade.
And it continued?
It just till June. And then we didn't know what was going to happen. And then I got the letter, so we don't know if there's a position for you now in the future. And then the following September, they called, and that's when I did 1 year at Sonderling. And that was for 10th grade. And it was, I believe that was when we had the split session. So I did that. That was a great experience.
Who was the English chair there?
Tom Campy. And I was there for a year. And then another position opened back up at West, and they got me back to West that following year. So in 1976, I actually did 1 year in the high school, and then went back to...
Did you have a formal interview at all? Do you remember?
Yes. I had an interview in the middle school with a few people, and then at the high school, I had to sit with Tom O'Brien, and he asked me a few questions.
Okay.
No, I'm sorry, I take that back. That was later on when I moved from. It was I think Harvey Brickman I met with
Okay.
back in '76.
Do you remember even one question that you were asked during the interview? During that interview? It's okay if you don't. I just was
Yeah,
curious.
I don't really remember the questions.
Okay.
I know that being a student in Brentwood and having an affection for some of the teachers and some of the programs, that was always a good thing because they appreciated the fact that I appreciated the
Yes.
school.
Sure. Now, with the distance that you have, looking back, not just as a beginning teacher, but as a student that came through the system, how is Brentwood today? And when you look at the headlines, this has to factor into your answer. But even the headlines of papers probably today, I mean, as recently as today, but when you look back, in many ways, Brentwood is different, but it's the same in some respects too.
Oh, sure. We over the years, we had our share of bad press. Back in the '70s, the racial tensions, the student walkouts, the moratoriums, and the armbands. We did all that in the '70s, or the kids did. I really think, though, that kids are kids. You're going to have the student that wants to learn, and you're going to want to have the student that just for whatever reason needs to disrupt. So it's not that different now. I mean, there are still wonderful kids in Brentwood High School, and I go there almost on a weekly basis because I volunteer. I still have been active with the Green Machine Parents Association. And so we have a concession stand we operate at even in high school. So I'm at the school once or twice a week, sometimes depending on the activities with the Green Machine. But I see the kids at night school, and the kids at night school sometimes aren't your most studious of students, but they're there, they're making the effort, they're trying. And, I don't see that everything is that different. Yeah, there are issues of people acting out and students acting out, and there has to be some strict discipline enforced, and there are some issues of control and I guess latenesses to class. That's a big issue. I mean, if the kids are out of class, they're getting involved in something they shouldn't be getting involved in. So, but is it really that different? I don't know. I had a great run teaching for the 33 years. Education on the whole has changed because what we did as students years ago, where we had to do all kinds of research and spend a lot of time, library time, it's a little bit easier for them now with the internet and their own, have all the apps on their phones. I mean, so yeah, it's going to be a little different and a little more challenging. But basically, the kids are still kids. They're just taller. I mean, I used to teach in middle school, and I went to the high school, and I realized that they're the same kids. They like treats for holidays. They like this. They like posters. They like colors. They like, oh, I want that folder. Oh, I want that folder. They're the same. They're just taller.
Better nutrition.
And so are parents. So are adults. If you go to a class and you're going to an adult ed and there's something with colors, oh, I want that one. We're still kids at heart.
Tell me about the activities that you have, because you were super involved in a lot of different programs, a lot of different things. Your area of certification was primarily in English.
Yeah, 7 through 12 English primarily.
But then you did a lot of coaching, and you did.
Well, in the early years, I did some coaching, and I supervised some groups. One year, I did. I actually did JV cheerleading way back for a year, 2 or 3 years with the soccer JV boys, and the girls soccer team, another year or two with the girls track. Back at West Junior High, I was a co-chair with the student council one time. In the high school, I didn't do as much. I was raising my son, and my husband was pretty ill for a lot of the years, so it was hard to get too involved in the afternoons. A lot of doctor appointments, but I did do home teaching here and there, and I still do that now and then. They call me. I have another home teaching assignment coming up this January, actually, which I do enjoy because I feel that on a one-to-one, you really can make an impact and you can help someone through. And whether a student is home with a tremendous illness, or whether they're dealing with a new baby, whatever it is, if they want the education and they're willing to put in the time, I'm willing to give them the time.
Plus, you've been, as you said before, active with the Green Machine and with the
yes, that's been a lot of, it's been a lot of work, but a lot of fun. And I got a special enjoyment out of it when I was teaching, because lots of my students were involved in it. You know, when you have 5 or 6 classes, you might have 1 or 2 students on the football team, or 1 or 2 on a tennis team, but you might have 6 or 7 in a marching band, because there's that many people involved. The band's 150 kids. So I would see that my students outside of the classroom on the marching field, and it was a different interaction, and they appreciated our help and us going to their competitions and taking the photographs and that kind of thing. So it was a nice thing.
Did your graduate work in college prepare you for what it was to teach in a district like Brentwood?
Nothing prepares you more than the experience and sharing and talking with other teachers. You know, I was really fortunate to have some really, really master teachers to work with, to learn from and to work with side by side. You know, Betty Stosey, Cass Howard, Judy Weissman, a lot of people who really do very well, you know, with reaching students and making learning fun, you know, and I really, although you can't take away the education and school and classes, nothing prepares you like being right there on the field.
I agree. Patty, forget the job description. What was your purpose?
I guess it was, in a way, paying it forward in a sense that I derived so much from the educators that took the time with me, that I thought that it was a valuable thing, and I would like to do something like that for others. You know, we look at certain people with awe and affection, and you never think that you'll be quite that good or that inspiring as someone was for me. But sometimes you're surprised when you find that you inspired someone else, and even something as recent as I just was sent an invitation to attend a wedding in Florida, and she was a student of mine, an English student. She was also a member of the Green Machine, and she's out of school a number of years. And I would have gone, but I was up in New Hampshire helping a friend who just had a double knee replacement. But it was just a nice thing to be remembered that way. And with other students, I had 2 students, brother and sister, who were in the National Guard along with their father. The family's all very, very into, you know, service, and they went to Afghanistan. They came back. They did 2 stints over there, and when they came back, they actually brought me one of those dedicated flags, and you know, I put their picture in it, and I have it in a glass case, and if it weren't for teaching, I wouldn't have ever known them, and it wouldn't have given me the chance to be in that part of their lives it's just teaching. Teaching is it's a wonderful thing, and I get very sad when people now tell their children don't go into teaching. There are no jobs, because when people say to me, "What do you think?" I just say to them, "Listen, there will be jobs at some point. You know, you can't not go into teaching."
And if you've ever told anyone that you teach in Brentwood in response to a question where you teach, you certainly haven't then been asked at some point or another, have you ever been afraid to go to work? Aren't you afraid to go to work there? Have you ever been afraid?
No, I'm there at 10 o'clock at night every Tuesday.
Let me ask you a different kind of question. What is it that makes you angry?
What makes me really angry? Oh, I have to think about that.
Okay.
I don't.
All right.
I don't.
Because you don't strike me as a person who easily angers. You are an emotionally intelligent person and generally control your emotions very well. But nevertheless, there are people who can push your buttons. I'm sure there are. Everybody has somebody who can hit those points and set you off about things, about something. And
I guess I get most angry when people, or when someone just closes off and won't listen, and just my way or the highway. There's no conversation. And you know, you have to, when you're working together with people and you're working toward a common goal, and in most cases we are, you need to work together. You can't have one person saying, you know, "Oh, well, it's got to be this way," you know. And
when somebody does that, then it's impossible for you to share what you brought.
Yeah, and
which is yourself.
Yeah. That gets me angry when people just stop the lines of communication,
right.
And then you don't want to communicate anymore, and that's not good either.
Right. Your official date of retirement was?
Well, I guess officially it was July something, 2009. But 2008. Why do I keep saying 9? Yeah. 2000. Time goes fast when you're having fun. No, 2008. My son graduated from college, and I retired.
What was the last building assignment that you had in 2008?
I was in the R.O.B.S High School.
Okay. Do you remember your opening salary the first year, beginning salary?
Yes. I used to know the exact number, but I know it was, I don't know the exact, but it was like $8,900. That was and then I felt rich then.
Yes.
Rich.
Yes. Everything is relative. You know. How about the decision to retire? Was it an easy one? Was it a difficult one? And what was the reason that you decided it's time?
Well, I was approaching 55, age 55, and there were talks of incentives to leave. My friend Judy Weissman had decided to retire in 2007. And when we were talking about it, she said to me, "You know what? You could actually retire this year too, because you can." My birthday's in August, so I could have retired in the June or July of the year I was going to turn 55, or the year I was about to turn 56. Either way. So she said to me, "You should retire. You should retire with me." And I was like, "Yeah," and I hadn't thought about it. So it was like, I think January or something, she's telling me this, or whatever the date was. And I said, "Well, when would I have to let you know? When do I have to decide this?" She says, "Oh, the paper has to be in by tomorrow." I said, "Well, no, I can't decide that." I said, "My son's still in college. No, let me wait till he's out of college." So then I started thinking about it, and then watching her go through her plans to get everything ready and close up her room and distribute her materials. I was like, "Gee, I could be retiring." And then I thought about life without teaching as I know it.
Right.
And it was a little bit frightening because I live alone, not having my husband. And I thought, well, will I be bored? Will I be lonely? Will I, what am I going to do with my spare time? And I am happy to report that I don't have all that much spare time. I find all kinds of things to do. And I have to say that my biggest joy is traveling, and photography, and taking hundreds and hundreds and thousands of photos. I take a lot. Digital photography is a wonderful thing, and since 2008, I've gone on quite a few big trips and some smaller trips, but I look forward to continuing to traveling. And as long as, knock on wood, I have good health, that's what I'm going to do.
Is there anything that, when you look back, is there anything that you wish you had done differently?
Oh, sure, there are a number of things, but
nothing jumps out at you as a big, heavy regret that you have. You don't have.
No.
Okay.
No, I have no regrets. Well, let me say that the only regret that I have, which is a general thing that I have to be mindful of all the time, that when you lose people in your life that are special to you, I tend to mourn in my own way a long, long time. And while doing so, you miss quality time with the people who are left. And I thought I learned that after my brother in 1982. And I probably didn't, because I thought I learned it again after my husband's passing in 2001. But you keep on losing people as time goes on, and you're sad for this and you're sad for that and you're missing them for this, and then the next year someone else is gone. So I think my only regret is that I spent a lot of time missing the people that I miss and not celebrating the people that I have. So what I try to do is be mindful of that, and what I'm learning, it's taking a while, but this past year has been pretty quiet. I mean, I didn't lose anybody this year in 2011, but 2009 and 10 I lost 4 significant people. And so now what I want to do is, instead of be sad about the people that are not here, I just want to keep them really present, and just go on and like I say, I love traveling. I see a sunset and I just say, hi Rick, hi Mike, hi Dad, hi Mom, hi John, hi Chico, hi everybody, and I have to say to myself, they gave us gifts, and they're a part of our lives. They're a part of who we are. And I have to really focus on people who are here. And that's what I've been doing. And I've been trying to do that more. And I find that I'm a lot happier for that.
Mm-hmm.
I have some wonderful friends that are like family.
Yes.
And, I think that's really special.
Did you have a favorite year of all of the years?
A favorite year? Well, 1970 was my high school graduation year. That's always a great number.
Okay.
Yes. But a favorite year, let me think. I'll have to think about that one.
Okay. All right.
Maybe it'll be this year, 2012.
Okay. What advice, if any, could you offer to a person who is just about to walk the walk, that's going to become an English teacher and give their time and their lives to public education?
Well, I actually know two students now, two daughters of friends of mine who are actually walking that walk. And I encourage them and I tell them that, and my son too. I mean, if you have to sub and you have to wait and you have to be patient, then that's what you have to do. But life's a long life, hopefully. And if it's something that you want to do and something that you'd love to do, then keep on working toward that because um, it takes a certain kind of a person to be a teacher.
Yes.
It takes a person who and that something does get me angry. I get angry when people talk about, oh, teachers have it so easy. It's not so easy. And you know what? I don't complain that a doctor makes a lot of money. I never wanted to be a doctor. So don't complain that I have a retirement or I have a pension or I have summers off. That's a choice that we make. And so I tell students or friends in this case, I'm thinking of two in particular, two very good friends and their daughters are still now actually in the process of going to college to be an English teacher. I will encourage them. I will give them materials that I still have. And after all these years, I thought I would throw everything away. I can't. I gave a lot away, but I have copies of things and double copies in case I lose them. But I think it's a wonderful, wonderful thing to be a teacher of whatever discipline you love. Because if you love it, someone else will learn to love it. And they can tell if you're excited about something, then they get excited about something. Just over the years, some of the, let's talk about it being excited. One year in particular, very quickly, in middle school, I had a class write a possible letter to Otto Frank after reading the Diary of Anne Frank. I said, if you could tell Mr. Frank something, what would you want to tell him or ask him? And I said, we're going to look at the letters and maybe we'll pick one and send one and try to send it to him. One of my students jumped the gun, Chris Perticos, I'll never forget. This was like in 1978 or something, or a while. And he sent a letter. He didn't check it grammatically. I didn't even proofread it. He says, oh, I sent the letter. I said, you did? He said, yeah. I said, okay, let's see what happens. Well, wouldn't you know it, after the summer ended, he got a response back, handwritten from Otto Frank. And he was now in high school. He sent his sister up to my room with this letter. And he said, go tell her to look at this. So, he came back. She came back with an obituary the year later to show me about Mr. Frank passing. But he came up with a letter. He said, look what I have. And I went crazy. I was up and down, running down the hall. Mary Jo, Tony, Betsy, look at this, look at this. We made a big display. I made copies. I still give that letter to students and copies of that letter to other students. And it was a wonderful letter. And he said to Chris, he said, thank you for your letter and your concern. And he answered his 3 questions. And he said, as I will be 80 and I think it was 80 years old. I'll be 80 this year, and I can no longer keep up all his correspondence. So please tell your friends I won't be writing to them, but I wrote to you because you were the first one. And it was a wonderful letter. And those kinds of little moments of excitement, they're exciting 30 years later. And in fact, this next trip I'm going on, going back to the Rhine River from Amsterdam to Basel, Switzerland. And that's where Chris mailed a letter to Basel, Switzerland. And I have no knowledge of Basel except to know that Mr. Frank lived there. And Chris just wrote, Mr. Otto Frank, Basel, Switzerland, didn't even have an address, and it got to him. So when I get to Basel at the end of the Rhine River cruise, after starting in Amsterdam for 2 days, so I'm going to go see the Anne Frank house again. I saw it back in 1976. Those kinds of moments. And when I went there in 76, I didn't know I was going to teach 8th grade English and have such an affection for that whole whole story and that whole situation.
I have two questions I'd like to ask you, and this is a toughie. If you were to receive the absolute, total, omnipotent power that you would need to make a couple of changes in public schools today, in public education today, you saw over all those decades what we had, and particularly in a district like Brentwood, what we had and what we needed. Today, now you've been out for a while, but you still have perspective now. What changes would you make if you had that magic wand that you could wave it and see the changes institute?
Well, one of the things that I think would assist any English teacher would be to have, actually any teacher, every teacher, every discipline, would be to have a class set of books in the classroom and have the identical sets of books at each student's home. Not to have them carry the books back and forth. And that would require a lot of money, a lot of bookkeeping, but that would be a way to make it easier for the child to be prepared. Not that they shouldn't be accountable. They have to have a notebook and bring the paperwork back and forth. But those books are heavy. When you start piling on 6 and 7 big books in your backpack and the students are taking them home and bringing them back, they're going to forget one or not take it home, or it's too heavy to carry. They'll try to do a quick job in their lunchroom so the homework's done, but they don't have to carry that book home.
Patty, do you think that computers in the class and computers at home would accomplish that today? Or...
Well, something, if they could, now we're talking about computers, we're talking about class sets.
Yeah.
If I had the power and if I had unlimited,
yes,
it wouldn't be nice if they could all have a Kindle with all their school books on that Kindle, not everything else. Just something that would make, they do now have so much accessibility to the computer in school. Every school, I think, has computer labs, and now they have computers in word processing. I know that when I would teach the students in the computer lab, they would be more apt to write and less. They would complain less. They would write longer. They would write more and more and not find it a chore because they were typing it. It would make it easier for teachers to read things. I can't tell you how many. I wear glasses, believe me. And I'm taking them off, I'm putting them on, I'm trying to read the penmanship. When you have it typewritten, it's nice and easy. I think if they could do more for the students in all classes, so that they could have the materials at home as well as the materials in the classroom, and even for the teachers. When you have students bringing books back and forth, if you're reading Macbeth, someone's going to forget it. It's just the way things happen. Or they were late, they got up late, they had the flat tire, it's in the car. Now you have to find more books. And there were never enough books. Always that was a problem. And then some teacher needs them the next week, and you have to rush and share. If everybody could have their own set of the materials, that would be ideal. It would be wonderful.
Yes. Okay.
So that would be my little dream.
What haven't we talked about that we should certainly have at least mentioned, Patty? Is there anything that we have missed?
I don't know, John. I think you covered a lot.
What do you miss most about being in every day in the classroom?
Well, now, for example, when I go down to help with the green machine,
yeah,
I don't know all the kids' names.
Okay.
And I don't know them individually anymore, so I'm out of school long enough that even though I may know like the older siblings of the kids, I don't know the new kids coming up. So I kind of feel out of touch with it that way. Although being a part of the Band Parents Association for all these years, I feel like I still can go into school and I'm not a complete stranger.
Okay.
But if I walk into school for a green machine function to put flyers out, I'll walk into a faculty room now and I don't really know all the people, or I might know one or two and not 25 others. And I kind of feel like, oh my goodness, they all look so young. And I'm starting to feel old in that, because I don't feel old, but when I look at them, they look so young. And I miss the to be present, so I know who the people are. I kind of feel a little lost.
And I know you're still in touch with a lot of people you worked with, and you still get contacts from students that you had in the class, so you're not totally adrift with all of that. But here's an easy question. What don't you miss?
I don't miss reading hundreds of compositions on a Sunday night.
Mm-hmm.
Although some of the compositions were fun to read.
Yes, yes.
I don't miss having to set the alarm clock and getting up at a certain time. And I don't miss the deadlines. I don't miss all the deadlines. The pressure.
Stress.
Yeah. I think my blood pressure's down about 20 points since I retired, I have to say.
PatticiaPattiMonsen, you're a delight, and I am very grateful that you've given us the time to sit and tell us what you think and what you remember and what you enjoy about your career. And have a wonderful year, this new year that we're approaching now.
I sure will. You too, John. Thank you.